Okay, to finish this unit off, we're going to talk about the ecological footprint. And this is actually a pretty essential concept to this unit. It's a measure of how much a person consumes expressed in areas of land. Essentially, it's the impact a person has measured as an area of the land or water needed to produce the goods consumed and assimilate the wastes that are generated. So if we look at this idea, in order to maintain your lifestyle, how much of the environment needs to be used? So how much land is needed to produce the goods and services, the things that you like to buy and eat and use and live to support your particular lifestyle? So how much do we need to produce the energy that you need? How much land do we need to not only for your house to be situated on, but then also to build and have the things inside it? How much timber and paper to use? How much land is used to produce the food and fiber? Obviously, meat requires a much higher footprint than eating vegetables does. And how much of the fisheries, how much ocean land do you need to have to consume the amount of seafood? If the present footprint of the global human population, if everyone lived how we lived in the United States, if everyone had the same quality of living and the same access to the foods and automobiles and technology and homes and everything that we had, we would need 5 Earths to support that sort of lifestyle. We will be looking at the footprint in detail with a couple of different experiments and labs. The idea that science is a process, you guys know this from other science classes. The scientific method is not something that's new to you. The whole idea of you have some sort of question, there's a hypothesis, you collect data, you interpret results, you disseminate the findings. The questions and observing is the first step of the scientific process. It's the first thing that we look at. Hypothesis is that educated guess that can be proved through experimentation. But the thing that's a little different that you may not have heard of is what's called a null hypothesis. It's a statement that can be proved wrong. So if we look at sort of a real simplistic way, one of the hypotheses way back when, and this is an easy one to understand because it's not very complicated, is that the world is round. What was very, very difficult for people a long time ago to prove, how are we proving that the world is round? Well, instead, the null hypothesis is that the world is flat. So we can disprove that the world is flat. If we can prove the opposite, that statement is not true, the world is not flat, then it lends support to our actual hypothesis, which is the world is round. It's sort of looking at the same question from the opposite way. It's a hard way to think. I'll admit that it's sort of a backwards way to think about things. Collecting data, so replication, repeating the measurement many times. Sample size, so how many times was that measurement repeated? What was the size of your data? Did you compare 2 specific plants, or did you compare 20 of each of the plants? Accuracy and precision, that's all from chemistry, how close a measured value is to the actual or true value, and precision is how close they are to one another. And then uncertainty is how much the measured differences from the true value. In terms of interpreting results, we have these 2 ways to look at it. We have to analyze the data. It involves 2 types of reasoning, inductive and deductive. So inductive reasoning is making general statements from specific facts or examples. Essentially, you're looking for a pattern or a trend and then generalizing it. You don't know if the trend will continue, but assume it will. If we can look at the statistics, the data of class sizes, graduating class sizes at Voorhees High School, we can see that they have been decreasing. At one point in my career, we were close to 400 kids per grade, which is very, very crowded. This year's incoming freshman class is at 237. If we look back at the data from all of the years, we can predict, we can use inductive reasoning to predict that class sizes are getting smaller and smaller at Voorhees. And then we can go back to look at and see why is this occurring. Deductive reasoning is applying a general statement to a specific facts or situations. You know a fact, and then you're using other facts to back that fact up. You're saying, okay, I know this to be true, and these are the facts that are going to support that truth statement. Once you're disseminating findings, you have to share it at conferences, publish the results. The big thing is reproducibility. Can other scientists reproduce what you have found? And that will verify and add credence to whatever your findings are. This is my classic diagram that we've used in chemistry when you have your answers are very close to one another, but they're not very precise because they're not hitting the target. You have, this is saying high accuracy but low precision. I would sort of say this is fairly random. I usually look at this to be a little more, if you're looking for accuracy, much closer to the bullseye. But here, this is what we're striving for. High accuracy, high precision. A theory is a hypothesis that has been repeatedly tested and confirmed by multiple groups of researchers. It is widely accepted, which is different from a natural law. A natural law is a theory that's been tested so many times there's no known exceptions. So we've moved natural law things like the law of gravity, the laws of thermodynamics. Controlled experiments are experiments that are in the controlled conditions of a laboratory. That's sort of what we're very familiar with. This was a controlled experiment with chlorpyrifos. It was looking at some sort of pesticide, and does it have effects on the central nervous system? The null hypothesis is that chlorpyrifos has no observable negative effects on the central nervous system. So they took two groups of rats. One group was fed it, one group was not. And then they tested for some sort of enzyme activity in the brain. And they realized that enzyme activity was reduced compared to the normal one. So under these conditions, feeding this to young rats reduces the activity of a key brain enzyme. And the null hypothesis is disproved. So it was saying that there was no observable negative effects, and it, in fact, did have a negative effect. Natural experiments are things when a natural event, like a volcano, acts as an experimental treatment to an ecosystem. So when a volcano erupts, we want to see what does it look like when we have a primary community. What does that regeneration look like? How does that happen? We don't want to go out and destroy thousands of acres of land just to study that. But if something naturally happens, then we can take advantage of that opportunity to study what it looks like. Examples are the massive fires that were in Yellowstone National Park. So you have a national park where a huge percentage of the acreage burned, and now we can look and study what that new growth looks like. Experimental science presents challenges. There's no control planets to compare the Earth to. We can't say, let's compare it to this other planet. We only have this one planet, and there's a lot of variables that are interacting. So we don't have a control. It's very difficult to decide what is better or worse for the environment than something else. This will bring up lots of interesting conversations through the course of the year as to what is better or what is worse, what is the best option. There's so many interacting parts. It's not easy to apply one system to another. And then we have to take into account human well-being as a concern. People that are unable to meet their basic needs are less likely to be interested in saving the environment. If you have your basic needs met, you have the ability to make that choice. If you don't have food, you're not going to think twice about not cutting down that rainforest to be able to grow crops to feed yourself, because you need to have your basic human need of having food be met. And so it puts those of us that have a high status of living in a unique position to sort of have a lot of choice or responsibility in how this global problem is going to be solved. This is where the discussion in environmental science comes in. This is where there's no black and white. It's totally fascinating compared to the other sciences, which are very much chemistry, physics, and biology are very, very much more black and white than environmental sciences. And I hope we can have a lot of interesting discussions and debates on this. The final image is just looking at the poor exposed to a disproportionate amount of pollutants and other hazards. So these women are recycling circuit boards from discarded electronics by hands, which contain elements and mercury and things that you should not be exposed to. And so there's a disproportion there. So again, this will be all part of our discussion this year.